Julien, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Jordan, for having me.
And would you start by explaining what is path-dependent volatility and how is it innovating the field?
Well, path-dependent volatility is this simple idea of connecting the past asset returns to the implied volatilities or some future realized volatilities. So it's kind of a very simple idea, and it turns out to be like a new, very interesting paradigm for modeling volatility. And so in the past, what I've done together with Jordan Lekeufack, my co-author on that paper, is to do an empirical study proving that, in fact, implied volatilities and future realized volatilities can be very well explained in a simple way by past asset returns. And so that was somehow quite surprising because there's no reason that there will be a very strong link between the two, but it happens that there is this strong link. And actually the link is simple. I mean, the simple model explains very well the volatility this way. And those models, even though they're simple, they create like very rich, intricate dynamics that capture a lot of the spot vol dynamics that we observe in the market. So this can be useful for pricing and hedging derivatives or for generating realistic future scenarios of the joint movements of financial assets and the prices of options on those assets, or also even to kind of have ideas of strategies for statistical arbitrage or things like that. Yeah.
And what sort of information do you use in the calibration?
So now what I presented here is a model with, so it's an asset pricing model that is based on this path-dependent volatility model uncovered in the paper with Jordan. So now we use this relationship between past returns and volatility to create an asset pricing model. So we do it in discrete time because the empirical study was in discrete time, and typically, for instance, if you think of the hedging derivative, this is typically done once a day, so there's a kind of discrete time structure in practice in the market. And the benefit of using discrete time is that we can use daily returns that are not conditional on the volatility, that are not Gaussian, so that have fatter tails, so more extreme event, like again, returns normalized by the volatility can take larger values than if modeled just by Gaussian. And when we do this, that allows us to estimate well the model either on the past time series of the asset, so that would be the econometrician view, so that would be just looking at the information given by the past asset prices, or we can calibrate this to the today's prices of options, so that would be more the vision from people like selling and hedging derivatives, or we can actually mix both sources of information. So it's quite interesting in this model. This model calibrates very well to just the time series of past asset prices. So this is one possible source of information. So the other source of information possible is just today's prices of options. So this is typical in the derivatives business. And we also look at a time series of option prices. So those are option prices, but not just today, but also like 1 year, 2 years in the past. Because this information is also there. And when you think even, so this is useful for different purposes. For instance, if you look at just hedging a structured product, you will hedge your product. So you will use a dynamic hedge that will depend on the realized path of the asset price in the future. So for this, you want to be well calibrated to the dynamics of the asset price. So that's more like calibration, taking the information of the past asset prices. But you will also use static vanilla options, but just today, when you sell your structured product. So this is calibration to just today's prices of options. So it's important also to have this piece of information, but also your vanilla hedge may also be dynamic, and so you want to have the correct dynamics of the option prices. And so, for instance, we in our work with Léo Parent, who is a postdoc, who is my co-author on this paper, we are also taking into account the time series, but of VIX in the past, which is just some implied volatility. And so those three sources of information, they correspond to kind of the three parts in the of a structured product. And typically what people do in the derivatives business is just calibrating to today's prices of options. But in fact, that means that they throw away a piece of information that is actually useful also in the hedge. And so that's the reason for taking into account more information in the calibration or estimation of the model.
What insights can quants infer from reconciling the two views of finance?
Yeah, so those two views of finance that you're referring to is really what I kind of call P calibration or Q calibration. So this estimation from just time series of the asset price or calibration to the today's prices of options. And it's true that typically it's seen as two different sub-worlds of finance, okay? And that kind of people say, oh, it's very separate and like kind of it's hard to reconcile them. But precisely when you think about it, those path-dependent volatility models, because they make a connection between the past returns and implied volatilities, they're very good candidates for reconciling those two views of finance, because if indeed there is this connection that we haven't covered, then if you're well calibrated to the time series of asset prices, then you will be automatically quite well calibrated to the surfaces of implied volatilities because of this link that we've covered. And so that means that those models, they are, very good candidates for reconciling the two styles of estimation, model estimation. And what's useful when you reconcile the thing is that, for instance, if you think of trying to build a statistical arbitrage strategy, so you say, okay, I observe the asset prices, they look like this, I calibrate my model on this, I can price options with this model calibrated only on past asset prices, so absolutely no information on option prices in the estimation process. I price my options in this P model, and actually what I will observe from what I just explained is that actually there will be a difference between the model P model prices and the market prices, but not that large. The difference can be interpreted as some market price of risk, and so it can also lead to ideas for statistical arbitrage. For instance, you observe that that implied volatility in the market is larger than what my P model says it should be, and so I can, let's say for instance, sell the expensive option and delta hedge, and do this like systematically, and on average, if the P model is indeed correct, that would give you a strategy that would be winning on average. Okay, and so this is something you should do only when you have first done the job of building models that are very good at reconciling P and Q. Not reconciling in the sense that model parameters will be the same when calibrated under P or under Q, but will be quite close, because then the difference has the most chance to be meaningful. And the other interesting aspect of kind of reconciling P and Q is for banks or even for insurance companies, if they need to generate realistic scenarios of what can happen in the future, not only in terms of asset prices, but also like the derivatives written on those asset prices. But path-dependent volatility naturally does this because it will generate like realistic path for some financial assets, but at the same time, realistic path for implied volatilities, because the implied volatilities depend only on the past returns that will have been simulated. So it's a nice tool that is useful for stress testing and risk management in general.
Julien, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Joanna.